Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Brian Anderson, who goes by the Tick Terminator, and we will dig into that pretty deeply throughout this conversation. But before we get started, Brian, introduce yourself in your own words to the audience. Who is Brian Anderson today?
I am a tick and Lyme disease prevention specialist, basically what I do. I work with a lot of companies who have outdoor workers to help protect them out there, plus, hunters and hikers and backpackers and anybody who goes outdoors, whether it's somebody, work on your garden in the back. Just trying to teach them about ticks, how to keep them off. So I say, if you keep a tick off, you can't get bit, you can't get Lyme or any other tick-borne disease. It's all about prevention. That's what I say.
I love it. I love it. So, Brian, what is it that started you down this path? I mean, you're not a sufferer of Lyme disease. So what was it that made you feel that this was important for you to kind of take on this, this life's mission that you've jumped into?
Was at this point, it's probably well over 10 years ago. A fascination I had as a kid kind of crept up again. I live in a rural area in Upper Michigan, and my wife just absolutely despises ticks, like almost everybody does. And I was starting to think about how can I help keep them off of myself and stuff like that. And so I started doing a little bit of research in my basement, actually, and I would have the grandkids. They would help me too. I would bring ticks inside the house, okay, purposely, to do experiments with them. And I was trying to get them to react to different smells. Like I go upstairs underneath the kitchen sink and look for baking soda or cleaning products or anything to try to get them to move. And that's kind of how it started, was just trying to think, okay, when I bring ticks in the house, how do I get them off of me? Was there some kind of chocolate that I could develop that ticks would like better than us, better than our blood? And guess what? There ain't nothing they like better than our blood. I found that out too. So that's kind of how it got started. After a couple of years of just playing, a friend of mine had a really bad case of Lyme disease, and sometimes it can be fatal to some people, some different tick-borne diseases, which is really a shame and terrible. And that kind of ramped up my research even more, thinking, gosh, what can I do for prevention? I looked at a lot of things online. There was very little talk about prevention. It's all about Lyme disease, which is wonderful support groups out there, lots of them. But I'm trying to think, okay, let's stop it, in the beginning. So that's kind of what launched, even that I spent about a year putting together a website. From about 16 to 17, I launched it, 2017. And it's kind of evolved since then. It's been about 5 years now or so that it's been going. And I do this pretty much full time now, which is it's a lot of fun to be able to share the information and help companies, with their workers out there too, and so on. And I speak around the country, which is a blast. I love doing that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's very interesting. I mean, like you said, Lyme can be absolutely devastating. It affects every person a little bit differently. I've got a very good friend who is a Lyme survivor and now a thriver as she's kind of gotten on the other side of it. One of my old players had a very, very bad case of Lyme. I've got two other friends who had not quite as terrible cases of Lyme, but it really is it is kind of an unknown because it's not something that's regularly tested for. When you go in with symptoms, they're not testing for it. So what you're doing, I think, is awesome, where you're trying to prevent it on the front end, where you're not having, you're not getting it in the first place. So, what was your background before going down this road that you were able to, kind of, create this?
well, my background had nothing to do with what I'm doing here. I've been in
Okay.
Numerous different things. I was a college recruiter for a number of years. I've worked in factories before. So I've done a lot of different things like that. As a college recruiter, I did a lot of speaking in high schools, which was a lot of fun. For 12 years, I did that up until 17 or so. And so none of that really prepared me, I guess, essentially, although the things that the business standpoint, it helped me. I have done some sales and stuff like that too, so that's helped me. But yeah, it's kind of that. I mean, when you really have an interest, then you just dive into it, and that's kind of what I did,
Yeah.
trying to find some answers there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And it is, it's one of those things where, obviously I think most people, when they're thinking about ticks and that sort of stuff, they're thinking more about their animals in many cases than themselves, so you got like Bravecta and, all kinds of stuff out there that you can give your dog to keep them from getting Lyme disease, but we don't necessarily think about, you know, something for humans to to be preventative for Lyme disease. So, tell me a little bit, exactly about, what you've developed and how it works.
I didn't really develop it, but I found out more about it. I'm thinking I live in a rural area. I remember when the light bulb went on to me, however many years ago that was, and I'm thinking, how come more people haven't heard about this product? It's a product called permethrin that you literally spray on your clothes, and it sticks to the fabric, and shoes, socks, pants, outer clothes, typically, and it sticks to the fabric and stays there. You don't have to put it on every day, is the cool thing about it. It goes through the laundry several times. Our stuff can actually stay in your clothes literally for 6 months, which is really nice. I've worked with a lot of backpackers in the last couple of years. They've done, some videos on it too. And backpackers, especially, people who outdoors people, hunters and fishermen, that fish streams, stuff like that, like it because they don't have to put it on every day, as opposed to like DEET, which is a wonderful product, but you have to put it on a daily application.
Right.
So that makes a big difference. Permethrin, most people don't realize what it was, and I found out permethrin is basically created in 1973. Permethrin is a synthetic version of pyrethrum, which is a naturally occurring insect repellent that's actually found in a chrysanthemum flower. Now, us Americans, we're not going to go and chop up a chrysanthemum flower and sprinkle on ourselves. Are you kidding me?
Probably not.
Oh, we want something that's readily available, easy to use with very few directions, for guys especially, and simple. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what they did in '73. They came up with 4 different formulations for permethrin. One is for farmers to put on their crops to keep bugs off. Another one is for farmers to put on their cattle and livestock to keep bugs off. Another one is for doctors to use on licensed scabies. And then the fourth one is to put on your clothes, like what I use. So I was just happy when I found that out, and it comes in numerous different ways. But it's really nice. I use it all the time, all the time.
Yeah. So you're saying, talking about as a hiker in general, because we do quite a bit of hiking since we've been traveling in the RV. Um, but I've known some people who've done like through hikes of the Appalachian Trail and stuff like that. So you're saying that they can do one application of this and it's going to stay on their clothing very possibly throughout the duration of like a through hike of the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Coast Trail or something like that.
I had a specific lady that did the Appalachian Trail here this summer. She started in February from Georgia, and I don't know how many months it took her, because I just heard from her recently in late September. So that's see, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. That's about 8 months, okay? And she'd already used it the year before, so she knew how it worked, and it would work great for her. And what she did was just to be safe, okay? Because you're out there, I mean, you want to be as safe as you possibly could. She put it on when she left Georgia, and then she put another application on in Virginia, and then her last application was in I'm looking at a map, in Vermont, just to make sure. And she loved it. She never had any problems with ticks. So, I mean, she could have used a 6-month mixture, but she probably would have had to apply that again. I actually shipped her to different locations that she would tell me to make sure that she could reapply again.
Hmm.
And it definitely overlapped, which in a situation like that, we can both understand. We don't want to take any chance. We would rather have too much than not enough.
Right.
Over prepared. So, I mean, somebody taking a couple months, absolutely, that'd be real easy to do that. I would probably treat it with 4 or 5 months, just to be safe, because better be safe than sorry. And the stuff even lasts going through the laundry too. So typically what I do is I treat my clothes for usually about 3 months at a time. That's 12 weeks and 12 washes. You can make it for 24 weeks, 24 washes if you want. It just has a lot of people. Let's say the kids are going to summer camp for a week. They could literally treat the clothes for the lowest version would be 3 weeks and 3 washes. And that's fine for a whole week for them gone to camp.
Right.
Because you never know where ticks are going to be. They're going to be, I mean, I don't know, you want me to get into this then too right now?
Sure. Absolutely.
Ticks don't jump, they don't fly, they don't drop out of trees. They are what I call opportunists. They're looking for an opportunity. They're going to sit on a blade of grass on low-lying vegetation like grass and shrubs, stuff like that. And as we walk by, we brush up against that vegetation, and they're sitting there with their outstretched arm. They got 8 legs, and they grab on. Okay. And then we don't even know, we can't feel them. Then they start walking around on us until they can find a nice, good spot, to have a meal for 3-4 days. So I tell people, especially during tick season in tick habitat, do daily tick checks. Are very important. Daily tick checks, extremely important, because, like I say, you can't feel them. I mean, they look for a place to eat on us or some kind of animal, and let's say it's on the back of our leg, around our neck, and behind our ears. Soft spots like that. People got them in their belly buttons. And you could have been any place. And I mean, men, women, whatever you're thinking, yes, even there too. I'll leave it at that. Any place where there is skin is a possibility for those stinking little suckers to get on us. So that's just crazy. But being prepared helps a lot, because when they crawl on the permethrin treated apparel, your pants or whatever, it drives their nervous system nuts. Every step they take, they can feel the permethrin molecules, and eventually it's going to kill them, and they'll fall off and die. But if they're on it for very long, say less than a minute or even less than that sometimes, it drives them crazy. It doesn't bother us at all because it dries clear, it dries odorless. You can't see it, you can't smell it, but they can feel it. Little insects, they're not really insects, because ticks are actually part of the spider family. They're actually arachnids because they have 8 legs.
Right. Right. So you're talking about applying it on your clothing, but what is someone like myself who, is generally hiking in shorts and short sleeves, sometimes cut off sleeves. So I still have a lot of exposed skin. Is it something you can put directly on your skin, or is that harmful to you? Like how would someone like myself be protective, with having bare legs and bare arms on a hike?
Excellent question. I'm glad you asked. Seriously, because permethrin is not designed for skin. Okay, it's not going to kill anybody if you got on there. And at the worst, it'd be maybe a slight little rash that goes away. But it's no big deal. But anyways, for that, what I do is I would definitely spray my shoes, everything that's not skin, my shoes, and however big the socks are, and the shirts, everything outer like that. And then I probably put DEET on the rest of the stuff. The way the products work is like this. DEET is permethrin is by far, without question, the absolute best deterrent to defense against ticks. DEET is probably second best and further down the list, okay, but it's second best. The way DEET works is the scent, the smell, the aroma of the DEET is what, like a mosquito or a tick would sense and smell, and they don't like it, okay? So that's how it would keep them away. As an example, I had a black fly land on my thigh a couple of years ago. It was a perfect case in point, and of course my jeans were treated with permethrin, okay? And I watched the black fly kind of dance around. They call it hot feet syndrome. It was literally high stepping on my pants because it couldn't stand the feel of the permethrin that it was sensing. So then it flew off. I say, cha-ching, I won because it didn't bite me. Now, ticks are crawlers, so every step they take is going to drive their nervous system nuts. They're going to eventually fall off and die. But so I say DEET on the skin, permethrin on the clothes is probably the best 1-2 punch you can possibly do. And as far as DEET goes, you don't need 100% DEET. The only difference between DEET at 20% and 100% is that 100% DEET will last a little longer. It's not any quote unquote stronger. It just lasts a little longer. I would rather reapply like a 20 or 30% DEET, maybe every 5 hours, than have the 100% DEET that may last longer, because sometimes it's a little stronger and it can maybe do some damage on some plastics on occasion.
Hmm.
But that's the difference between those DEETs that most people don't realize. Another product that they can use on skin is called picaridin. That's a good one too. IR 3535 is another good thing too. A lot of people will use sometimes essential oils even too. Natural
Interesting.
things like that. Those are all daily applications. I like the permethrin because it's on for a long time, so it kind of depends on what people are thinking, what their thoughts are. But permethrin has no problems. DEET is been around since 1945 when they created for the military. So that's a very good product too. Those are things that I use personally. So
Yeah, very interesting. So, Brian, how much time have you spent researching this as you've kind of gone down this little rabbit hole, so to speak?
oh my gosh, it's been years. I mean, I tell people I spend hundreds of hours, scanning things, learning things, educating myself, uh, watching videos, reading articles, all over the internet. I mean, lots of time uh, to do that. So yeah, and I still learning even too. There's always something new to learn. I'm always kind of hungry to learn. I still look today, well, not today, but even this year and in past months, on what are new things happening. Because I try to stay on top of it as best I can, because people kind of look for me as somebody who knows a little bit more than they do about it, anyways. Uh, so I want to stay on top of it as much as I can.
Yeah. And I mean, why is it so important? Like why did this become such a passion of yours to, you know, keep, trying to prevent Lyme before it happens?
Just because I'm kind of a prevention guy, anyways, to a certain extent. And I'm thinking, we've got these ticks. I mean, I live in a very rural area, like I said, and there's a lot of ticks around here. I mean, I remember, taking them off myself when I was a kid.
Hmm.
When we would visit this area, we didn't live here. I mean, as a kid, 4 or 5 years old, you'd play out in the woods, with your brothers when we visit my grandparents here. And at night, mom would do a tick check, strip down to nothing but a smile. She'd check you all over. And on occasion, she'd pull them off. And it was kind of fascinating to me to see a tick stuck to me. All right. And I'm thinking, man, this is kind of cool. Kind of like a mosquito, only they don't fly. And she just pluck them off. And we never had a problem back in the 60s and 70s, ever. And now Lyme disease is so much more, I hate to say rampant, but there's a lot of it now where there wasn't years ago, because Lyme was actually founded, well, where it got its name was in Connecticut in the mid 70s, when these mothers, their kids had a strange arthritic type of condition that they eventually tracked back to ticks. And so they figured, well, what are we going to call this thing? So they named it after the town of Lyme, Connecticut, hence
Hmm.
the name. But it's been around for, long before that. But it's gotten worse, I think, with more and more people who live in outlying, areas. Deer population is doing well. They say climate change has made a difference too, because our climate is maybe a little warmer. So what that means is that, say right now, for us, it's about 30 degrees, which is normal right now. But last week, it was 50 where I live in Upper Michigan. So ticks are still out even in that kind of weather.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people about freezing, about 32 degrees is kind of where they come and go. But in the southern states, I mean, they can be around basically year round, because in
Right.
southern states, like where you're at, and the Gulf Coast states, uh, they're getting they're not getting 32 degrees that often.
Right.
And ticks are pretty hardy. They don't die off in the winter either.
Right.
So I can get into the life cycle here too in a minute, but that's kind of what I feel about those different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're originally, as you know, we're originally from Pennsylvania, which is a huge hotbed for
Oh,
ticks and Lyme for sure. So yeah, it's something that, like I said, I'm very aware of. But go ahead and talk a little bit about what that life cycle is for a tick, because I like me personally, like once it got cold when we still lived in Pennsylvania, I knew they weren't around, but I never really knew, where they were.
Yeah, I had one on my deer that I got just last week. I mean, it was 50 degrees when I got it. And I remember looking down at the neck, and this big, fat, ugly, disgusting, tick the size of almost my finger had released itself from the body and was sitting on top of the fur, because the deer was dead.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. But anyways, the life cycle of a tick is like this. The female gives birth typically in June to about 1,000 to 5,000 eggs at a time, which is just disgusting. I'm thinking, Lord, why not just 50? Why does it have to be in the thousands? But she lays those on the forest floor typically. And after a couple of weeks, they hatch out of their egg. And then they're looking for some kind of meal. They're looking for their first host. And normally it's going to be something very low to the ground because they're just a speck of brown on the ground at that point. I mean, you can imagine how teeny tiny they are. So the best thing that they can get on in northern climates especially is a white-footed mouse, something very close to the ground. They can't get on a deer, that's for sure. So white-footed mouse. They get on that white-footed mouse, the typical mouse that runs around the woods, and start sucking the blood out of it. The germs, or they call pathogens, that come out of the mouse that go into the tick is what actually gives them a disease if they're going to get it, because they're born disease-free. Most people don't realize that. They get their diseases from a host, which is typically a white-footed mouse. So after a couple of days of sucking the blood, they drop off and they do whatever ticks do, which ain't a whole lot. I mean, that's their meal for the year, one meal for the year. So they just kind of kick back and they just bask in their full belly deli that they just got off, and just kind of chill out for the rest of the fall, the winter. The next spring, during that process, they grow 2 more legs, wake up the next spring as what they call as a nymph tick. All right. And now they have 8 legs. That's why they're part of the arachnid family, the spider family. Now that tick, the size of a poppy seed now at this point, think how small a poppy seed is, okay? If they got Lyme the summer before from their host, they're going to have it for the rest of their life. And now that poppy seed size tick that could get on your shoelace, which you can't even hardly see, is just as lethal as a full-grown adult, okay? So in a tick world, size does not even matter. You can be teeny tiny, you're a full-grown adult, and you can be a big problem. So they could get on you and are on some little animal that they look for their host for that year and get on and suck the blood. That fall, that winter, after they had their meal for the year, they molt into the next series, come out the next spring as a full-grown adult. Now we can really see them even better. They look for a host that year again. A lot of times they'll get on a deer because they're even bigger at that point. And the male and the female, once they're on a deer, they could be on us too. But let's say they're on a deer, they will feed on the deer, and then they will mate, and they will ride that deer out the rest of the winter. And next spring, the male gets off, he dies, the female gets off, and she gives birth anywhere between 1,000 to 5,000 ticks, and then that's enough to kill anybody, and she dies. So their life cycle is about 3 years, okay. 2 to 3 years, but they have to eat 1 time a year during that cycle. So they lose that. See, the difference nowadays is that ticks will have longer in the fall sometimes and quicker in the spring when snow melts to look for the host. That's all they do is look for a host. They don't have eyesight, but they have a real good sensory system and smell where they can smell their host of some point coming near them. That's why they try to get on it at that point. So that's a life cycle of a tick.
Very interesting. I had no idea. I had no idea how long they lived or anything like that. So it's pretty interesting stuff for sure. So Brian, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think would be valuable to the listeners before we start to wrap some things up here?
Yeah. If you get a tick stuck on you, that's probably one of the most important things we need to talk about. And this here is my people that are watching on video, they can see this is a pet tick. It's a stuffed tick. Of course, I have one. I got a smaller one too. It's a little baby tick. But let's say this tick is stuck on you like this, okay? The way you take a tick off is very important. Don't just grab it by the body like this, which we have all done, and jerk it off, okay? What you want to do is probably the best 2 things you can use is a tick tick key that you can wrap right around there and just slide it right off, okay, without grabbing the body, or a fine tip tweezers. Okay, you want to grab at the very base and pull up, because see, when you grab by the body like that, you're kind of squeezing it, okay, and at the point of squeezing it, it may puke the bad stuff in you at the time you're taking it off because you're making it so uncomfortable. I tell people, be nice to ticks. Don't tick off a tick when you're taking it off. You know what I mean? Be nice to it. After that, I highly recommend take a picture of it, maybe save it. I don't care if you shoot it with a 30-06, but be nice to it, because you don't want to make it puke in you at that point. And then take it off. The next thing you want to do is monitor that bite. You may want to maybe if a little bit of the head is stuck in there, just wash it off. Our bodies, know how to just excrete that in a couple days. It's no big deal. But then watch that bite area. If you get what they call is a bullseye rash, which looks like a circle of red rings around it,
Mm-hmm.
that is a telltale sign that it's probably going to be Lyme disease. I mean, or if you have achy joints, flu-like symptoms, feeling really crappy all of a sudden because you got this bite, see a doctor. Okay, and I mean, there's all kinds of different symptoms. I mean, it could be like Bell's palsy in your face. You could, your vision could go funny. People have had all kinds of different things. But seeing a physician is so important. And typically what they will do is they will put you on an antibiotic called doxycycline, which is probably the best thing. Normally it's going to be on there for a couple of weeks. And in most cases, almost every case, that knocks it out of your system. I tell people it's all about early detection and early treatment. Do not ignore those things, because if you ignore those symptoms of feeling crappy and a bite and all that kind of stuff, Lyme disease, people have had it, they miss those symptoms. In probably most cases, they didn't read. Some people get bit, they don't even know they got bit by a tick. It's really hard in the beginning, in those first few days and a couple of weeks, to even get tested properly, because the tests are notorious for being a false negative or false positive. But a lot of times the doctor will give somebody antibiotic based on the symptoms. And especially if somebody knew they got bit by a tick, do not ignore those, because it's not worth it. I mean, it's very, very important to get that taken care of in the beginning, because they don't get better. They only get worse. And that's just with Lyme disease.
Yeah, and
So,
that you just mentioned something that I want you to dig into a little bit more before we wrap things up. When you talk about sometimes people get bit by a tick and they don't even know it, because I know, some of my friends who've been diagnosed with Lyme, like that's the case, or like I didn't even know I got bit by a tick. And you'd mentioned something earlier where you said about a tick releasing itself. Like I never knew. I thought once a tick bit you, like that was pretty much the end. They were there, you pulled out, you burn it, you do whatever you do to it, to get rid of it. So that was kind of news to me when you said about a tick releasing itself. So, you know, how how can someone get bit by a tick and not really know it?
well, if it's the size of a nymph tick, the size of a poppy seed, that can be just tiny. Let's say that's behind your ear and you have longer hair, or maybe up in your scalp someplace. That, and let's say somebody is out backpacking or someplace where they're not maybe grooming themselves every day, so to speak. That could be on there for a couple, 2-3 days. That they're normally on their host for 4 or 5 days at the most. Usually it's a couple days. So that's how they can be on there. Or maybe you do find the tick after a couple days, and that still could be enough time for them to give you something. A lot of people say 24 hours, but some of them can be a lot less than that. It can be almost 15 minutes on you, and it could cause a problem for you. So, but yeah, grooming yourself, doing thorough tick checks are very important. I mean, I will, when I come in from being out in tick habitat, they strip down. I got a mirror, check everything, to really be sure. And I have short hair anyway, so that helps. My wife has long hair, so that's, and it's brown also. So, that's
Right.
kind of one of her fears, is getting a tick stuck into that, but she doesn't go out in the woods as much as I do,
Right.
during the season, but. anyways, yeah, that's, tick check's
Very
very
interesting.
important.
Very interesting. So, Brian, how do people find you on the internet if they want to reach out to you, find out more about ticks, or find out more about what you're doing? Where can they find you on the internet?
My website is called the Tick Terminator. And as you can see, my logo is a tick in the shape of a hand grenade, which is, I have an awful lot of fun with that because it's a war out there. But the tickterminator.com is where they can find me. I'm also on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm starting to put more stuff on there too. I'll be continually putting more stuff on there as I do different experiments. I did a really cool, my wife was actually downstate Michigan here just recently, I mean, like a week or so ago, and she was at like a housewarming party, and they're on a lake, and the people could looked out in the lake, and they said, "Look at that! There was 2 deer out in the water. A buck was chasing a doe in the water," and she got a video on. So I made up a video about that. I called it "Deer Romance in the Water in the Lake" or something like that. So I've never seen anything like that. I've seen deer in water. I've seen deer, swimming before, but never a buck chasing a doe in the water, trying to, get romantic with her, So that's on YouTube there too. And I have a YouTube channel, the tickterminator.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting how that was. That's fun making that video.
I'm sure. So, Brian, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is "Many Little People in Many Little Places," which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes." So it's one of the little things that Brian does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I really enjoy what I learn about ticks and sharing that with people, because you got to be strange and weird, like me, to spend hundreds of hours learning about ticks and being able to educate them. And also, so many of my friends now know so much more about ticks, and that's keeping them healthy. And people, after I'm done giving a presentation, will come up to me and say, "Thank you. I learned something here today," and that is really gratifying for me. So I love, as many people as I can help in my little circle that I can, and hopefully that circles will continue to expand. But that's what I like doing. I can help people that way. So
yeah,
I got a poem here too.
Yes, please,
Please
share that with us.
Got me a little crazy to be a tick term. It goes like this: "I hate them little suckers. I want to terminate them all. So I do with permethrin and love to watch them fall. From head to toe, I spray the stuff. My shoe, socks, clothes, and hats, because it works on more than ticks, like skeeters, chiggers, and even gnats. So I ask you, if you're listening, to keep away from Lyme. Get started with permethrin, and now is the perfect time." Thank you.
I love it. I love that. Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's very informative. I love the fact that you're trying to get out in front of it, before people are contracting Lyme. So kudos to you for that. And, again, this is a great conversation. For folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books. And again, Brian, really appreciate the time. It's a great conversation.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
You bet.